In the 3rd year of his marriage to Lu Jie, the temperature suddenly dropped to -60 degrees. He encountered a fracture in the ice layer while escorting a group of energy experts. He begged me to save his first love first, not to worry about him. However, the detection screen displayed that the area he was in was the most stable, with a rescue success rate of up to 78, while Xie Yiyao's location had already begun to collapse a second time. "I'm sorry." I cut off his desperate pleas and shouted to the rescue team, "Save Lu Jie first." When we carried him out, the adjacent area had completely collapsed. Xie Yiyao was dead, and Lu Jie's leg was crippled. In the 8th year of extreme cold, I risked my life to gather the supplies we needed to survive, joyfully running back to the shelter, only to overhear his conversation with his confidant. Back then, she gave up Xie Yiyao for a private affair, causing her to leave early. Every day I live, I am reminded of how much I hate her. He tricked me to the edge of the cliff and personally pushed me down the icy ravine. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to that day when I held the communicator, trembling. This time, I gently cut off the communication and turned to walk towards the equipment room. "Since you are so determined to die with her, I'll grant your wish. Jian Yu, can you hear me? Jian Yu, choose. Choose Xie Yiyao. She can't hold on anymore. She can't die. I'm begging you." Lu Jie's voice was hoarse, punctuated by gasps of intense pain, each word dripping with unabashed urgency and cherish for another woman. Time seemed to freeze in that moment, then suddenly pulled and twisted. It was not an illusion. It was not a near-death dream. I have returned. We have returned to this crossroads that determines the fate of us all. In my previous life, at the moment when this message came through the communicator, I heard his desperate pleas to save Xie Yiyao first, the white moonlight he held dear to his heart. But at that time, the monitoring screen clearly indicated that the structural integrity of his area was relatively stable, with a rescue success rate of up to 78, while Xie Yiyao's location, marked by the dots of life signs, began to flash a dangerous red alert, warning of a secondary collapse. I love him. I love him so much that I lost all judgment and principles. So, I ignored his last wish, and amidst the exclamations of "Captain, no!" with eyes blazing red like a cornered mother beast, I roared at the rescue team, "Save Lu Jie first. That's an order. I will bear all the consequences." When we lifted him out from the crevices of ice and rubble, he was drenched in blood. His left leg twisted at a strange angle. Almost simultaneously, a deafening crash came from the neighboring area, and on the monitoring screen, the light that belonged to Xie Yiyao extinguished. Xie Yiyao is dead. Lu Jie's leg was crippled, and the look he gave me, from that moment on, was also completely crippled. In his gaze, there was no trace of the warmth from the past. Only a bone-deep chill and hatred remained. Yes, hatred. He hated me for having killed his pure and unblemished Xie Yiyao. In the extreme cold of the following years, even if I exhausted everything, dragging my battered body and soul through the hellish temperatures of -60 to 70 degrees, searching for the supplies and medicine he needed to survive, even having shielded him from the knives of thugs and nearly freezing to death while looking for energy sources, all I received in return was his growing disdain and indifference. In the 8th year of the extreme cold, I finally found a small box of antibiotics that hadn't frozen and become ineffective. I thought it would ease his pain from old injuries, and like a fool, I joyfully ran back to the shelter. But outside the medical room, I clearly heard his conversation with his confidant. Back then, for that ridiculous private affair, she insisted on saving me and gave up Yiyao, causing Yiyao to. His voice was low and filled with an inescapable gloom. His confidant seemed to want to advise. "But Captain, the lady has," he coldly interrupted, each word like a poisoned ice pick, shattering my last glimmer of hope. "So what? Every day she lives is a reminder to me of how much I hate her, and how much I owe Yiyao an apology." A few days later, he rarely softened his demeanor towards me, saying he had discovered a concealed spot that might hold a large amount of relics from the old days and wanted to take me there. I believed him. Then, At the top of that sheer cliff. He looked at me with an intensity one had never seen before, cruel and clear, and said, "Jian Yu. You owe Yao a life. It's time to repay it." With his own hands, he pushed me off the endless ice cliff. The biting cold instantly engulfed me, the sound of my bones cracking painfully clear, and in my final moments of consciousness. It was his resolute and icy back that stood atop the cliff. Hate him. It was more than mere hatred. It was a kind of karmic fire that could burn the very soul to ashes. A venomous animosity that longed to drag the entire world into hell. But now, this fire was sealed within my chest, burning calmly. I took a deep breath, the air at -60 degrees cutting into my lungs like a knife. Yet it also made me feel immensely awake. In the communicator, Lu Jie's pleas continued, filled with heart-wrenching despair. "Jian Yu, answer me. Save her. You must save her first." I raised my hand, my fingertips surprisingly steady. Pressing the off button on the communicator. With a faint beep, the world fell quiet. All the pleas, all the noise, all the nauseating hypocrisy, vanished. The rescue team leader, an experienced member of the squad, stood by and looked at me in shock. "Deputy, the captain." I turned around, a faint, cold smile on my face, illuminated by the pale emergency lights of the command center, giving off an eerie vibe. Communications are heavily disrupted. It's cut off. My voice was calm and steady, betraying no emotion. According to the current monitoring data, the probability of a secondary collapse in Area B is rapidly increasing, and the life signals are weak. Immediately adjust the rescue plan. Prioritize the rescue of Area B. And spare no effort to save Xie Yao. The rescue team members were taken aback, opening their mouths as if to say something. Lu Jie was the captain, with authority built over time, and his instructions just now had been so clear in the communication. My gaze swept over them, freezing them in place. Do I need to repeat the order? Or do you all want to watch as team member Xie Yao dies in there? The three characters bit into my tongue with a little more weight. The rescue team member jolted, standing up straight. "Yes, Deputy Team Leader. Prioritize rescue in Area B." He immediately turned around and began to roar into the communication channel. "Team 1. Team 2. Target Area B. Hurry. Move fast." The entire rescue center instantly became as bustling as boiling water splashed with a giant rock. Yet the direction was completely opposite to the last life. I stood there, watching the green, stable structure icon on the monitor representing the Lu Jie area, alongside the flashing, intensifying red alarm next to it that indicated the Xie Yao area. "Lu Jie. Didn't you always say that she can't die? Didn't you say you would rather take risks yourself just to keep her safe? Alright then. I complete you. I'll show you what it is that you are using your life to protect. And I'll let you taste the flavor of being reminded day and night by the one you love that you are a cripple. This time, I choose to save her. I want you to endure all of this alive." The rescue process turned out to be more difficult than expected. The collapse in Area B was extremely severe, and the rescue team paid a hefty price before they finally managed to carve out a lifeline after several hours of arduous work. Xie Yao was the first to be brought out. She was wrapped in a thick thermal blanket, her hair disheveled, her face smeared with dust and tear stains. Looking pitiable, as soon as she came out, she weakly sobbed and was quickly sent to the medical room. Aside from being severely shaken and having a few minor scratches, she was almost unscathed. After a long half hour, Lu Jie was finally rescued. In the area where he was located, a secondary compression collapse occurred, exactly as we had anticipated while making every effort to rescue Xie Yao. But the scale of it far exceeded that of the previous life. When he was carried out, his lower body was almost completely buried under deformed metal supports and frozen rubble. Unconscious, with blood soaking through the legs of his Special Forces uniform, congealed into a dark red ice. The preliminary diagnosis from the medical officer was far more brutal than in the previous life. His spinal nerves were severely damaged, and he had completely lost sensation in his legs. With almost no possibility of recovery, he was paralyzed. Lu Zhiga had been in a coma in the medical pod for 3 days. I didn't go to see him even once, under the pretext of needing to take charge and stabilize the order of the shelter. I buried myself in endless official duties and patrol tasks. The team members looked at me with a complex gaze. There was sympathy, confusion, but also a hint of an understanding that seemed almost natural. After all, to everyone's ears. Captain Lu Zhiya's last words before the communication was cut off were a plea to save Xie Yao. As a wife, I endured immense grief and the pain of feeling abandoned, complying with my husband's wishes. How noble and self-sacrificing I was. In fact, there were even those who felt indignant on my behalf. They thought Lu Zhiya was being too excessive, hurting his own wife for the sake of a team member. Look, people's hearts are so easily manipulated. On the evening of the 3rd day, I guessed he should be waking up soon. So I took a file and walked leisurely towards the medical area. Just as I reached the door of the ward, I heard Xie Yao's voice coming from inside, tinged with tears. Jie Gij, you finally woke up. You scared me to death. You've been in a coma for 3 days. At that time, it was really scary. The ice cap collapsed all of a sudden. I thought I was done for. Boo-hoo. Later I found out it was Sister Jian Yu who ordered to save me first. Did she misunderstand something? I know that you let me go first back then because you didn't want to implicate me. You're the captain and have the responsibility to protect each team member. But will Sister Jian Yu be angry with me? I stood outside the door, coldly watching through the observation window. Lu Zhiyi lay on the hospital bed, his face pale, lips cracked, and his gaze somewhat dazed. However, when he heard Xie Yao's words, he instinctively frowned and looked at the woman beside him, who was on the verge of tears. His voice was weak yet soothing. It's not your fault. It was my order. Jian Yu. He seemed to want to ask about my situation, but he didn't know how to start. Xie Yao immediately seized the opportunity, looking at him with eyes filled with admiration and reliance, choking out, Brother Zhiyu, thank you. You saved my life. If it weren't for you insisting that Sister Jian Yu save me first, I might have. The doctor said. Your leg. Sniff. It's all because of me. Don't worry. I will take care of you from now on. I promise. As she spoke, she reached out to hold Lu Zhiyu's hand. I pushed the door open. With a creak, the seemingly touching atmosphere in the ward was shattered. Both of them turned their gaze toward the doorway. Lu Zhiya's expression instantly became extremely complicated, and upon seeing my calm and untroubled face, his quickly smoldering anger and doubt settled down. Xie Yao, like a startled rabbit, jerked her hand back, stood up, and looked at me timidly, her eyes even redder, as if I were some kind of bully tormenting her. Jian Yu's sister, you're here, she greeted softly, subtly leaning closer to Lu Zhiya's hospital bed, adopting a posture that seemed both dependent and protective. I ignored her and walked straight to the bedside, my gaze landing on Lu Zhiya's legs, heavily cast and secured by mechanical braces. You're awake. Lu Zhiya stared at me intensely, his Adam's apple bobbing slightly. His voice hoarse. Why? Save her first? He indeed asked, in a tone that was both accusatory and questioning. I raised my eyebrows slightly, looking at him with a hint of amusement. Why? Captain Lu, before the communication was cut off, you were hoarse and desperately pleading with me, saying, choose Xie Yao. She can't die. I beg you. Do you need me to help you remember these words? Lu Zhiya was momentarily speechless, his face looking even worse. I was at that time. The situation was critical at that time, and the monitoring data indicated that the area where Xie Yao was located was about to collapse a second time, with a success rate far lower than that of your area. I interrupted him, my tone official and businesslike, as if delivering a task report. As the highest commander on site, I have made a comprehensive assessment and prioritized the rescue of team member Xie Yao, whose survival probability is lower and who you, Captain, specifically entrusted me with. Do you have any objections? I paused for a moment, my gaze sweeping over Xie Yao, who was quietly biting her lip. before returning to Lu Jiue's face. Or should I say, Captain Lu, that your words at that time were merely hypocritical pleasantries spoken in a moment of urgency. Deep down, did you actually hope that I would defy your last wish to save her? You. Lu Jiue was taken aback by my words, his chest heaving violently, and a strange flush appeared on his pale face. Clearly furious. He probably never thought that I would speak to him in this tone. With this attitude. Seeing this, Xie Yao immediately stepped forward and gently said, Sister Jianyu, please don't be angry. Brother Jiue didn't mean it like that. He just woke up. And he might be a bit confused. He just didn't expect to be hurt this badly. As she spoke, tears streamed down her face. She looked at Lu Jiue's leg, full of heartache and guilt. It's all my fault. If it weren't for me, of course it's your fault. I coldly picked up on her words. Xie Yao's cries abruptly stopped as she looked at me in astonishment. Lu Jie also looked up in shock. I looked at her, enunciating each word clearly. If you hadn't unilaterally deviated from the planned investigation route and gone to the more unstable Zone B, it wouldn't have triggered a chain reaction, leading to a widespread fracture of the ice layer. Captain Lu fell into danger while trying to find you, under limited rescue resources. Your actions consumed multiple batches of rescue efforts that could have been deployed earlier, indirectly causing Captain Lu to miss the optimal rescue window, resulting in aggravated injuries. With every word I spoke, Xie Yao's face turned a shade whiter. These are preliminary conclusions drawn from the subsequent investigation. I was merely at this moment ruthlessly tearing away that layer of embarrassment. So, I concluded, my gaze as sharp as a blade. Team member Xie Yao, you truly should take good care of Captain Lu. After all, you could say that the latter half of his life has been ruined for you. This kindness is something you must remember well, and repay throughout the rest of your life. Xie Yao's face instantly lost all color, her lips trembling as she looked at me, as if gazing upon a monster. She probably thought I would swallow my anger and at least maintain a facade of peace, never expecting that I would tear off the mask directly and lay bare all the responsibilities and grievances. Lu Jie looked at me as if he was meeting me for the first time. His eyes filled with disbelief. I had no interest in appreciating their shock and embarrassment. I placed the document I had been holding onto Lu Jie's bedside table. Also, this is for you. Lu Jiue's gaze subconsciously fell on the document. At the top, in bold, were the 4 large characters divorce agreement. His pupils suddenly constricted, as if those 4 words had burned him. He abruptly looked up at me, his expression filled with sheer shock, panic, and a kind of anger that felt completely violated. Jianyu. You. He wanted to say something, but he broke into a violent cough due to his overwhelming emotions. Xie Yao also saw that agreement, a flash of disbelief flickering in her eyes, quickly followed by an almost uncontrollable ecstasy, but she immediately concealed it, replacing it with a worried and anxious expression, gently patting Lu Jie's back. Brother Jie, don't get excited. The doctor said you can't get excited. I looked at Lu Jie's flushed face from coughing so hard, and the way he was staring at me as if I had done something unforgivable. All I felt was an icy wasteland in my heart and a hint of cold, smug laughter. I've already signed the document, I stated calmly, as if remarking on the pleasant weather today. Once you feel a bit better and can sign, just have your assistant deliver it to me. Having said that, I no longer looked at his murderous gaze or the feigned worry on Xie Yao's face, turning away and leaving the hospital room without a hint of nostalgia. As expected, rumors quietly spread overnight in every corner of the shelter. Have you heard? Deputy Jian is getting a divorce from Captain Lu. Is that for real? Captain Lu just got hurt like that while saving Xie Yao. Well, you can't really blame Deputy Jian, can you? At that time, Captain Lu was shouting to save teacher Xie first on the comms. That's true, but as husband and wife, they're supposed to stand together in tough times. Now that Captain Lu is paralyzed, Deputy Jian is just washing her hands of the matter. That's a bit too. Yes, and I heard that it was Vice Captain Jian's direct order to save teacher Xie first. which caused Captain Lu to miss the best rescue time. Really? That's two. Could it be that Captain Lu cares more about Teacher Xie? So Vice Captain Jian harbors resentment out of love and did it on purpose. Shoo. Keep your voice down. Vice Captain Jian is coming. The whispers abruptly stopped the moment I stepped into the cafeteria. Countless subtle gazes were cast my way, sympathy, inquiry, disdain, schadenfreude, like fine needles piercing the already numbed nerves. With a blank expression, I prepared a bland synthetic meal and found a corner to sit in. Jian Yu's sister. A tender and timid voice sounded beside me. Xie Yiyao stood by the table with a tray in her hands, her eyes slightly red, hesitating to speak. Looking like she had endured a lot of grievances yet was trying to appear strong. Behind her were a few teammates who usually liked to cluster around her. Is something wrong? I didn't look up. Jian Yu Jie. I know you're angry with me. Blaming me for dragging Brother Jie down. Her voice was tinged with tears. Enough for everyone around to hear clearly. But please, don't blame Brother Jie. And don't leave him. Okay, he really needs you right now. As she spoke, tears fell just perfectly, landing on the plate with a soft thud. What a clever tactic of retreating to advance. With the fragrance of tea wafting all around, I put down my spoon and looked up at her. Her gaze was calm, yet it made Xie Yiyao instinctively shrink back. Teacher Xie. I spoke up. My voice not loud but clear enough to echo through most of the suddenly silent cafeteria. First of all, whether I get divorced is my personal matter, and there's no need for an outsider like you to meddle. Secondly, I interrupted her attempt to justify herself. My tone flat yet imbued with undeniable force. Lu Jie entered a dangerous area against operational protocols to save you, which led to his serious injuries. This matter is clearly stated in the accident report. Your use of the word entangle is too casual. Xie Yiyao's face instantly went pale. A sound of suppressed gasping filled the surroundings. Accident report. Many people are still unaware of the specific details. I continued, my gaze sweeping over the several team members behind her with flickering eyes, finally resting on the face of Xie Yiyao, who was forcing herself to appear calm. The third and most important point is the rumor that I divorced him because he was paralyzed. I leaned in slightly closer to her and said in a voice that only the two of us could hear, yet with a chilling clarity, Xie Yiyao, you listen carefully. I, Jing Yu, find it disgusting. A man who unhesitatingly abandons his wife at the brink of life and death to choose another woman. A cripple who relies on moral coercion and public opinion to maintain relationships. He's even worthy of that. The cafeteria seemed to explode with invisible waves of ice. Everyone was stunned, looking at me in disbelief. Even Xie Yiyao was completely frozen in place. The color drained from her face, her lips trembling, unable to utter a single word. She probably thought I would argue, get angry, or become hysterical, but she didn't expect me to be so direct and ruthless, tearing apart all her fig leaves, trampling even the last shred of Lu Jiue's dignity as a man underfoot. I stood up, looking down at her precarious state, delivering the final blow. Aren't you always saying you want to repay kindness and take care of him? I've given you the opportunity, so seize it. Don't just go around crying and playing the victim. Show some real action. After all, I curled my lips into a cold sneer. Taking care of a paralyzed patient who is bedridden and irritable is not something that can be managed merely by talking. I hope your gratitude can last a little longer. After saying that, I no longer looked at her expression that seemed as if the sky had fallen, picked up the tray, and left directly. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the shelter became subtle. Discussions about me did not completely die down, but the direction had already shifted. When I donned the crisp Special Operations uniform, decisively handling various matters, leading the team in clearing ice and reinforcing structures, and even personally searching for a batch of precious cold-resistant parts. The whispers behind my back gradually gave way to a sense of awe and respect. In the 8th year of the apocalypse, power is the ultimate truth. A vice captain who can lead everyone to survive is far more dependable than a benefactor who only knows how to whine and a former captain lying in a hospital bed needing care. The application I submitted for an independent living unit was also approved with the utmost speed. When I moved out of the room I had shared with Lu Jie for 3 years. I felt no hesitation. The so-called warm memories left behind were long since blown away by the cold winds beneath the ice cliffs of my past life, leaving only the nauseating stench of hypocrisy. I didn't have much to pack. My core gear and personal belongings were quickly sorted out. After taking one last look at this place that had borne countless foolishness and despair, I turned around decisively and locked the door. The key was casually tossed into the recycling passageway in the hallway. Goodbye. No. Never to see each other again. My new home is at the other end of the shelter, closer to the command center and much quieter. This signifies the solidification of my status. And it also means that I am completely distanced from the living area of Lu Jie and Xie Yao. But that didn't stop me from knowing their news. Xie Yao indeed kept her promise and began her meticulous care for Lu Jie. Unfortunately, this flower vase who had never lifted a finger in her life. What did she know about how to serve a high-level paraplegic patient with extremely unstable emotions? In just a few days, all sorts of troubles began to emerge. Deputy Captain. The medical department reported that Captain Lu's bedsores are somewhat severe, and it seems that team member Xie doesn't quite know how to handle them. Deputy Captain. Logistics feedback states that the nutritional liquids allocated to Captain Lu are being consumed at an unusually fast rate. But Captain Lu's condition has not improved. Instead, he appears to have lost some weight. Deputy Captain Jian. Today Xie Era again cried at the nursing station, saying that Captain Lu threw a fit and broke things. She can hardly take it anymore. Listening to my subordinates seemingly reporting, but actually with a hint of enjoying the spectacle. I didn't even raise an eyebrow. According to the regulations, the supplies and medical support they are entitled to should be provided in full. I glanced through the patrol report in my hands, my tone indifferent. As for how they interact with each other, that's their private matter. We have no right to interfere and need not pay too much attention to it. The team members immediately fell silent and respectfully exited. I knew that these words would soon be twisted into something else by the time they reached Lu Jie's ears. What would he think? Would he consider me cold and unfeeling? Or start to doubt Xie Yao's ability to care? I don't care. I just need to ensure that the two of them are tightly bound together. Consuming each other, it's enough. That day, I went to the energy storage facility to check on the stock of the recently delivered batch of cold-resistant components. The only way there was through the external corridor of the central rehabilitation area. From a distance, I heard Xie Yao's voice, which was tinged with tears and had risen an octave. Brother Jie, don't do this. You have to take the medicine. The doctor said it's very important for your recovery. Get lost. All of you, get lost. I don't need your fake kindness. Lu Jie's hoarse and irritable roar followed, accompanied by the sharp sound of shattering porcelain. The glass door to the rehabilitation area was not closed tightly, revealing everything inside. Lu Jie sat in a wheelchair, looking emaciated, with deep-set eyes and veins showing through the once sharp, hawk-like gaze, now filled with frenzy and despair. He was wearing a patient gown that seemed a bit loose, with a blanket covering his legs. Xie Yao stood in front of him, and on the ground lay a shattered bowl and spilled dark brown medicinal liquid. Her hair was a bit disheveled, and her eyes were red, looking as though she had suffered much injustice. With a few nurses nearby who wanted to come forward but didn't dare. Brother Jie, I know you're in pain, but you can't take it out on your own body. Xie Yao cried out. I wake up early and stay up late to take care of you every day. My hands are calloused. How could you not understand me a little? Understand you? Lu Jie seemed to have heard the biggest joke in the world, suddenly lifting his head, his gaze fierce as he glared at her. If it weren't for your stupidity, acting on your own, would I have ended up like this? Huh? What else can you do besides crying? You can't even feed me medicine properly. Useless. Xie Yao trembled at his yell, her face instantly turning as pale as paper. tears flowing more fiercely, as if she might faint at any moment. How can you say that to me? I'm doing this all for you. For me. Is it to show how kind you are? How selfless? Lu Jiu sneered coldly, his words slicing through the air like knives. Put away that act. It disgusts me to watch. A profound silence fell around. The nurses lowered their heads, unable to bear the sight any longer. I stood in the shadow of the corridor, quietly watching this farce unfold. Look, once so deeply affectionate and unwavering, so willing to sacrifice life and death, now they are like two wild beasts trapped in a cage, tearing at each other, draining the last remnants of dignity. This is the love that Lu Jie exchanged for his very life. What a splendid and extraordinary performance it is. As if sensing the gaze from outside the corridor, Lu Jie suddenly turned his head. His gaze pierced through the glass, capturing me in the shadows with precision. At that moment, the fury and malice on his face froze instantly, transforming into sheer astonishment, followed by a tumultuous embarrassment, shame, and a hint of disarray and pleading that even he was unaware of. He saw the calmness in my eyes, a complete and detached indifference, as if he were watching two strangers utterly unrelated to me, performing a clumsy drama. There was no anger, no jealousy, not even a ripple. This indifference was harder for him to bear than any venomous curse. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but in the end, he simply clenched the armrests of his wheelchair, his knuckles turning white, and bowed his head in defeat, avoiding my gaze. And Xie Yao followed his gaze and saw me. Her cries abruptly ceased, a flicker of panic and jealousy crossing her face. And then, as if she found an outlet for her emotions, she shouted at me in a sobbing tone, "Sister Jianyu, you're just in time. You have to persuade Brother Jie. He can't go on like this." I slowly stepped out of the shadows, standing outside the glass door, my calm gaze sweeping over the chaotic scene, finally resting on Xie Yao's face. Team member Xie. My voice was not loud, yet it clearly reached everyone's ears. Taking care of patients requires patience and professionalism, not volume and tears. If you feel unable to handle it, you can request a change of caregiver. The shelter's regulations do not impose a mandatory requirement for benefactors to be Hansen. Xie Yao's face alternated between red and pale. I paused for a moment, my gaze shifting to Lu Jie, who had his head lowered, emanating an aura of despair, and I spoke in a tone as indifferent as stating a fact unrelated to myself. As for Captain Lu, your body belongs to you, whether you choose to actively cooperate with the treatment or give up on yourself. The choice is yours. After all. I slightly curled my lips, the smile devoid of any warmth. The only person responsible for your life is you. Others are under no obligation to pay for your choices. After saying that, I no longer paid attention to the extremely ugly expressions on their faces, turned around, and left with steady strides. After the farce in the rehabilitation area, I became even more focused on my responsibilities, leading the team out to search for supplies, reinforcing the shelter's defenses, and optimizing the energy distribution plan. I strived for perfection in every task. The demonstration of strength is the best form of authority. Now at the shelter, when mentioning Deputy Jian, there is a sense of trust and reliance in people's eyes. However, when it comes to Lu Jie and Xie Yao, it's more of an unspoken silence or a barely audible sigh. The two of them have evidently become synonymous with the trouble that is bound together. Xie Yao's careful attention is indeed full of flaws. Lu Jie's pressure sores not only failed to improve, but due to inadequate cleaning and frequent friction, signs of infection appeared, accompanied by recurring low-grade fevers. He already required special care due to bowel dysfunction caused by paralysis. Yet Xie Yao couldn't even manage basic abdominal massages or diet adjustments, often leaving a mess that added a layer of humiliating indignity to Lu Jie's physical suffering. He began to grow increasingly silent, apart from occasional uncontrollable outbursts of irritability. More often he was enveloped in a stillness as stagnant as water. Those once sharp eyes often stared vacantly at the ceiling or through the window. gazing at the eternally gray sky outside. I can imagine the torment within him, the physical pain, the loss of function, the despair of the future, and day after day facing a benefactor who can only cry and complain. Unable to even manage basic care. The warmth that once grew from guilt and dependence has probably long been worn down to almost nothing by the trivial and unbearable realities. And Xie Yao is clearly nearing her limit too. Caring for a paralyzed patient is far from what she had imagined. It's not just about putting on a gentle demeanor and saying a few nice words to get by. This job is monotonous, filthy, physically draining, and she has to contend with the patient's unpredictable bad temper. Her carefully maintained hands have become quite rough. And the fatigue and resentment in her eyes can't be hidden by the thickest filter. She began to frequently run to the medical department, not to inquire about the patient's condition, but to vent her frustrations. "Nurse, I really can't hold on much longer. The things Kanoya says sometimes. They're so hurtful. Doctor, could you prescribe a bit more sedatives? He can't sleep at night because of the pain. And it makes him so irritable. I can't rest either." She tried to shape herself into a tragic figure bearing humiliation and burden. But unfortunately, the audience was no longer the same people who could easily be moved by her tears. Everyone just offered a few perfunctory words of comfort and then turned back to whatever they were doing. The turning point occurred on a deep night. The alarm of the shelter suddenly blared shrill and high, indicating a level 2 alert. All combat personnel immediately took their positions. I quickly donned my gear, grabbed my weapon, and rushed towards the command center. The corridor was filled with hurried footsteps and shouts of commands. The atmosphere tense. As I passed the corridor near the medical area, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure out of the corner of my eye, sneaking into the storage room. It was Xie Yao. At this time, she wasn't by Lu Jie's bedside. What was she doing in the storage room? Moreover, it seemed she was holding a small bundle in her hands. A flicker of doubt crossed my mind. But the urgency of the situation left me no room for further thought. I immediately pushed this little incident aside and devoted myself entirely to commanding the defense. The invaders were not numerous, but they were well equipped. Like roaming raiders, the firefight lasted for over half an hour. Using our geographical advantage and thorough preparations, we successfully repelled them and captured 2 individuals. After handling the follow-up, I arranged the guard shifts. And it was already beginning to dawn. I dragged my slightly exhausted body back to the living area, but as I passed the medical area, I was stopped by the duty head nurse, deputy team leader. The head nurse said with a serious expression, lowering her voice. "There's something I think I should report to you." "You speak." When the alarm sounded last night, team member Xie Yao was not in Captain Lu's hospital room. When we checked later, we found that Captain Lu had fallen from the bed while trying to get water himself, lying on the floor for almost an hour, and it was only after the alarm was lifted that Xie Yao returned and discovered. The head nurse spoke with dissatisfaction. "Moreover, when we were cleaning out the storeroom later, we found this." She handed over a small, already empty metal can. The can had no labels, but there was a faint residue of pale yellow ointment inside, exuding a subtle yet peculiar fragrance that did not belong to the shelter's rations. It was a luxury item, high-end skincare cream from the old times. In today's world, this is an extremely rare and expensive thing. I immediately thought of the figure I had glimpsed last night and that small package. "Have you tested it?" I asked. "The preliminary tests show it's just a skincare cream, non-toxic." However, the head nurse paused. According to regulations, all non-essential supplies obtained privately, especially foreign items, must be reported. Team member Xie Yao has never made a declaration. Moreover, at this time, she has left her post to fiddle with this. I understood. While everyone is desperately fighting to fend off the outside enemy and protect our homeland, our Captain Lu, who risked his life to save the white moonlight, has been left alone in his hospital room, paralyzed in bed and unable to care for himself, just so she could hide and enjoy a bit of illicit luxury, leading to him falling out of bed, neglected for an hour. If a more serious accident had occurred then, If the invaders had breached the defenses. I took the empty can. The cold metallic touch spreading through my fingertips. Who else knows about this? Only I and the 2 nurses on duty that night. We've instructed them to keep it confidential for the time being. Well done. I nodded. I'll handle this matter. I didn't immediately confront Xie Yao about it. Instead, he first went to Lu Jie's hospital room. He lay on the bed, his complexion even grayer than before, his lips cracked, and his vacant gaze fixed on the ceiling. There was a noticeable bruise on his forehead, the result of last night's fall from the bed. Hearing the sound of the door opening, his eyes moved slightly. Upon seeing me, he quickly turned away, filled with an indescribable embarrassment and self-loathing. I heard you fell last night. I walked to the edge of the bed, my tone calm and unruffled. He stiffened for a moment, pressed his lips together, refusing to speak. Where was Xie Yao when the alarm went off? I asked again. He turned his head sharply, a tumult of complex emotions swirling in his eyes: anger, embarrassment, and a hint of barely perceptible panic. He obviously knew something, or rather, guessed something. She just stepped out for a moment. His voice was dry and hoarse, trying to justify himself, yet unable to convince even himself. Seeing him like this, I felt no stirrings in my heart, only a kind of almost cruel clarity. I gently placed the empty skincare cream jar on his bedside table, making a soft tap sound. Lu Jiue's gaze was instantly drawn to the small jar. He recognized this object, a classic item from a certain luxury brand of the old days. Xie Yao used to love this brand the most and had mentioned it countless times in front of him. Her words filled with longing. He even promised that when he returned from this mission, he would find a way to get her a can. And now, this empty can, like a silent slap, struck him hard across the face, when he was lying paralyzed in bed from saving her, struggling in pain, finding it difficult even to take a sip of water. When the shelter was under attack and everyone was on high alert, the woman he had fought so hard to save was secretly hiding the gift he had promised her. And at the most critical moment, she abandoned him for that trivial thing. This was found in the storage room. I spoke softly, shattering his last shred of illusion. When the alarm went off, someone saw Xie Yao go there. Lu Jie's pupils suddenly constricted. His breathing became labored, and his chest heaved violently. He stared fiercely at the empty can, as if he wanted to burn a hole through it. The veins on his forehead stood out, and the color drained from his face, leaving only a pale and furious expression after being utterly betrayed. He opened his mouth as if trying to say something, but no sound came out. Only those bloodshot eyes, frighteningly crimson, were surging with an overwhelming tide. It was anger, disbelief, a heart-wrenching disappointment, and deep mockery and despair over his own blindness. I looked at his near-broken visage and knew that the seed had already been sown. The cruelty of the truth can destroy his faith, far more than any outsider's accusations. I didn't say anything else and turned to leave the ward. In the following days, the medical area seemed like a silent battlefield. The atmosphere was terrifyingly low. Lu Jie was completely silent. No longer was there the previous deadened despair, but rather a kind of silence that brewed a storm. A heart-stopping stillness. He refused to let Xie Yao touch him again. Even the water and medicine she brought would be pushed away by his icy gaze. Xie Yao was clearly panicking. She tried to explain, her voice tinged with tears, repeatedly reciting that pale excuse. Brother Jie, please let me explain. That cream is from a long time ago. I've forgotten about it. I was so scared that night. I hid in the storeroom. I didn't mean to leave you behind. Lu Zi's reaction was to simply shut her eyes, or turn her head, treating her as if she were air. This utter disregard was more unbearable for Xie Yao than shouting and scolding. She began to grow restless, her eyes often flashing with a hint of resentment, especially when she saw me calmly moving through the shelter. My reputation rising. I knew she was on the verge of losing it. A desperate person often does something even more foolish. That afternoon, I was in the armory counting a new batch of repaired weapons when Xie Yao came over. She deliberately chose a time when there were other team members around. Jianyu Jie. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was enough for those nearby to hear. Her face bearing a facade of strength mixed with feigned grievance. Can we talk? I put down the energy rifle in my hands, gestured for the nearby team member to continue working, and then looked at her. What's the matter? She took a deep breath, as if gathering her courage. Sister Jianyu. I know you hate me for stealing away Ji, but now that things are like this, could you please be magnanimous and stop stirring trouble between me and Ji? He is unwell and emotionally unstable right now. I really just want to take good care of him. What a clever twist of black and white, turning the tables. Although the surrounding team members did not stop their work, their ears were perked up like radar antennas. I could almost applaud her poor acting skills. Stirring up trouble. I raised an eyebrow slightly, my tone dripping with unabashed sarcasm. Xie Yao, are you referring to your dereliction of duty that caused him to fall out of bed? Or are you talking about your secret stash of forbidden luxury items? Xie Yao's face instantly lost all color, her eyes darting in panic. You're lying. What luxury items? That's all your slander. Whether it's slander or not, you know in your heart. I stepped forward, closing the distance, my gaze sharp as a knife, my voice cold as ice. Do you need me to bring that empty canister and the testimony of the on-duty nurse before the entire team and let everyone weigh in on this? When the shelter was attacked and all the combat personnel were fighting desperately against the enemy, you, Captain Lu Jie, the benefactor who risked your life to save him, abandoned him alone in the hospital room to wait for death for the sake of that shameful thing. Xie Yao, your gratitude is indeed quite unique. My voice echoed clearly in the equipment room, each word like a heavy hammer, striking against Xie Yao's precarious disguise and hitting the hearts of every team member present. Around me were the muffled sounds of gasping and disdainful glances. Xie Yao was completely flustered, screaming indiscriminately. No, it's you. It's all because of you. If you hadn't insisted on saving me first, how would Brother Jie have been paralyzed? You're the one who harmed him. Now you want to harm me again. You evil woman. May you die a terrible death. She appeared almost insane, pointing at me with a trembling hand, her face smeared with tears and mucus, completely devoid of the delicate and fragile little flower persona she usually displayed. Seeing her utterly broken state, I couldn't help but laugh. It was a cold laugh, filled with endless sarcasm. I harmed him. I echoed her words, stepping closer to her, forcing her to instinctively back away. Xie Yao, do you need me to remind you who shouted desperately into the communicator? Save Xie Yao first. She can't die. Was it me who held a knife to his throat and forced him to say that? Was it me who made him break the rules and run off to save you? Or was it me who turned him into a cripple, laying in a hospital bed, unable to care for himself at all? By the last sentence, I nearly shouted, my gaze piercing and fixed on her pale face. Xie Yao was rendered speechless by my question, trembling all over, only able to repeat meaningless words. No, it's not like that. Enough. A hoarse but anger-laden growl echoed from the equipment room entrance. Everyone turned to look in the direction of the sound. There stood Lu Jie, surprisingly propelling his wheelchair on his own. At the entrance, his face was ashen, his chest heaving violently, and his bloodshot eyes, like a dying beast, fixed intensely on the disheveled Xie Yao. He had clearly heard all the conversations from just moments ago. Zinio Gij. Xie Yao seemed to have spotted her savior, crying as she tried to leap forward. Shut up. Lu Zinio abruptly interrupted her, his voice trembling with extreme anger and disappointment. Xie Yao, I never would have thought. You are actually this kind of person. No, Zinio Gij. You have to listen to my explanation. It was Jian Yu who framed me. Framed you. Lu Zinio laughed as if he had heard the biggest joke, pointing at Xie Yao, his fingers shaking. That jar of skincare cream. Is it the brand I promised you back then? Huh. Even now you're still thinking about this. I changed into this for you. I've become like this for you. And yet you He was so enraged that he couldn't continue speaking, suddenly coughing violently, an unusual flush rising on his pale face. At that moment, immense anger and a sense of betrayal, along with long-suppressed pain, completely shattered him. He blacked out, collapsing limply against the wheelchair. "Brother Jia!" Xia Yiyao screamed as she rushed over. "Captain!" The surrounding team members panicked as well. The scene was in complete chaos. Yet I just calmly watched everything unfold. I observed Xia Yiyao futilely shaking the unconscious Lu Zai, watching as the team members clumsily pushed Lu Zai toward the medical room. Lu Jie was completely changed after being rescued once again. He was no longer irritable, nor was he silent. Instead, he exhibited a deadening calm. Only in his deeply sunken eye sockets would there occasionally flicker a shocking, almost obsessive dark light. He began to cooperate with the treatment, even proactively requesting rehabilitation training that was no different from torture for him. The nurses privately whispered that Captain Lu seemed like a different person, and that gaze made one feel uneasy inside. After experiencing an embarrassing public incident in the equipment room, Xia Yiyao appeared to have thrown caution to the wind. She no longer made an effort to maintain that weak and pitiful facade. When caring for Lu Jiyue, she became perfunctory and mechanical, even tinged with subtle impatience. Sometimes, when Lu Jiyue groaned in pain from the training, she would coldly say beside him, "Just bear with it. Are you feeling uncomfortable now? Why didn't you think about the consequences when you were trying to be a hero back then?" Lu Jie closed his eyes, his jaw clenched tight, the veins at his temples throbbing. But he said nothing. I knew he was enduring the excruciating pain in his body, enduring Xia Yiyao's biting remarks, and most of all, enduring the overwhelming regret and the mockery of his own blindness. That day, I led a team on a search and made an unexpected discovery in an abandoned underground warehouse from the old era, a batch of relatively well-preserved antibiotics and analgesics, along with several boxes of extremely precious nerve repair medications. This was a crucial strategic resource for the entire shelter. On the way back, we were ambushed by a small group of Icefield raiders. In a fierce battle, we annihilated the enemy at the cost of 2 minor injuries on our side. But to protect a new team member, my arm was grazed by an energy blade, leaving a wound that wasn't deep but looked rather gruesome. Returning to the shelter, the medical officer was treating my wound when Lu Jie happened to be pushed in by Xia Yiyao for a routine checkup. He saw the bandage wrapped around my arm. His eyes suddenly narrowed, and his lips moved as if he wanted to say something. But in the end, he just gripped the armrests of the wheelchair tightly, averting his gaze. The lines of his neck taut. Xia Yiyao seemed to have seized on something, speaking in a mocking tone. "Oh, Deputy Captain Jian really is imposing, leading the team out again to show off. Which pretty boy did you save this time? To end up like this?" I couldn't even be bothered to lift my eyelids, telling the medical officer, "Is the medicine ready? The batch of newly found antibiotics. Prioritize allocating them to the few team members who were seriously injured and infected." "Yes, Deputy Team Leader," the medical officer responded respectfully. Xia Yiyao's eyes lit up when she heard antibiotics and nerve repair drugs. But her expression fell when she learned they were prioritized for others. As she pushed Lu Jiyue away, I clearly heard her lower her voice, yet still loud enough for me to catch her complaint. "They find good stuff and don't think to let you use it first. I think she's doing it on purpose. Deliberately trying to make it hard for you." Lu Jiyue did not respond at all, but I saw his hands resting on his knees, the knuckles turning white from the effort. I thought Xia Yiyao was merely complaining, but I never expected her greed and foolishness to far exceed my imagination. Late that night, I was handling documents when the communicator suddenly beeped urgently. It was an emergency message from the pharmaceutical warehouse guards. "Deputy, someone has infiltrated the pharmacy, attempting to steal the newly stocked nerve repair serum. We've caught them in the act." "Who is it?" I already had a guess in my heart. "It's team member Xia Yiyao." I rushed to the medicine warehouse immediately. Xia Yiyao was being held by 2 guards, her hair disheveled, her face still bearing the panic and defiance from her capture. She was tightly clutching 2 boxes of the nerve repair agent that had just been brought back yesterday. Seeing me, she shrieked like a cat with its tail stepped on. Jianyu, what right do you have to grab me? These medicines are for Brother Ji Yi. You're hoarding supplies and deliberately not letting him use them. You want to kill him. I looked at her coldly. The distribution of medicines is uniformly managed by the medical officer according to the urgency of conditions and the principle of resource maximization. When did it become your turn to steal? Steal. I'm just taking it to use. Brother Ji Yi is the captain. What's wrong with him using some medicine? Xie Yi Yao struggled, speaking indiscriminately. You're just jealous. Jealous that Brother Ji Yi has me in his heart. That's why you're targeting us everywhere. You can't wait for him to never get back on his feet. I'm almost laughing at her logic. Xie Yao, do you still think it's because I'm jealous of you? I walked closer to her, my gaze sharp as an icicle, piercing through her ridiculous delusion. You stole the life-saving supplies from the refuge. Caught red-handed. Do you know what the consequences are according to wartime regulations? Xie Yao's expression finally changed. Stealing important supplies during war will at the very least result in expulsion from the shelter. Outside is a frozen hell with temperatures of -60 degrees. Being expelled is equivalent to a death sentence. No, you can't do this to me. She retreated in panic, suddenly looking toward the warehouse door as if she had seen a savior. Brother Zeno, help me. Jianyu wants to kill me. I turned around. Lu Jie didn't know when he had wheeled himself to the warehouse door. His face was pale as he looked at the scene before him, his eyes filled with utter exhaustion and a nearly numb disappointment. Jie Gij. You have to tell her that this medicine is for you. I didn't steal it. Xie Yao seemed to have grasped the last straw, crying out in desperation. All eyes were focused on Lu Jie. He was silent for a few seconds. Those seconds felt as long as a century. Then he lifted his gaze and looked at Xie Yao, his voice hoarse yet exceptionally clear. I didn't send you to steal the medicine. Xie Yao stood there as if struck by lightning. Lu Jiuan no longer looked at her. His gaze turned to me, filled with a complex, ineffable emotion. And he spoke with difficulty. Jianyu, according to the rules, handle it. After he finished speaking, it was as if he had exhausted all his strength. Slowly, he pushed his wheelchair, turned, and left. His silhouette was desolate, as though he had aged 10 years in an instant. Lu Jie, you bastard, son of a bitch. I stole the medicine for you. How could you do this to me? You're not human. Xie Yao completely broke down, cursing hysterically with filthy language that was unbearable to hear. I coldly watched her throw a fit and commanded the guards, put her in the confinement room, and wait for processing. After finishing the follow-up, I walked out of the warehouse and found that Lu Jie had not gone far. He was standing in the shadow of the corridor, his wheelchair sitting there all alone. Hearing my footsteps, he looked up. In the dim light of the corridor, his face was deathly pale. His eyes filled with red bloodshot veins, swirling with too many emotions: regret, pain, self-reproach, embarrassment, and a kind of almost humble pleading I had never seen in his eyes before. He opened his mouth, his voice dry and hoarse, carrying a barely perceptible tremor. Jianyu, I'm sorry. These 3 words seemed to consume all of his dignity and strength. I stopped in my tracks, standing a few steps away from him, the cold light of the corridor drawing a clear boundary between us. I looked at his disheveled and regretful expression, feeling a cold calmness spread through my heart. Now you want to say sorry. It's too late. Lu Jie. I slightly curled the corners of my lips. That smile held no trace of emotion, only endless detachment and mockery. I cannot afford Captain Lu's apology. After all, you are someone who would give up your life for team member Xie. What does this little, trivial matter count for now? After Xie Yao was locked in the isolation room, she initially yelled and cursed furiously, using the most venomous language to attack me and Lu Jie. But a few days later, perhaps realizing that throwing a tantrum was futile, she began to change her strategy. She started a hunger strike. The guard reported that every day she simply curled up in the corner, silently crying, repeatedly murmuring, "Let me see Brother Jia. I just want to see him one more time. Even if I die, I want to die in front of him." When the news reached Lu Jia, he was undergoing a painful leg muscle massage to prevent his muscles from completely atrophying. Upon hearing the guard's report, he abruptly clenched the bedsheet at his side, his knuckles turning white, and his tightly shut eyelashes trembled violently. But in the end, he simply squeezed out between his teeth, "No meeting." He couldn't see her. He knew this was yet another one of Xie Yao's tricks. Seeing her would only ensnare her further, only make him feel more embarrassed, and reflect more clearly on his initial foolishness. However, Xie Yao's infatuated act has, surprisingly, had an effect on those who are either unaware of the truth or deliberately pretending to be confused. It's unclear when it began, but rumors started to circulate in the shelter. Teacher Xie is quite pitiful too. She stole the medicine for Captain Lu after all. Yes, although the method was wrong, it was out of genuine feelings. Now that she's locked up, Captain Lu won't even see her. That's really heartless. I heard she's on the brink of death and wants to see Captain Lu before she passes. Isn't that something we can agree to? If you ask me, if it weren't for Vice Captain Jian barging in back then and insisting on saving Teacher Xie first, Captain Lu wouldn't have ended up paralyzed. They might have been together by now. Where would all these troubles come from? These discussions spread like the murky water in a gutter, silently seeping forth. There were even a few team members who had received minor favors from Xie Yao in the past, who collectively wrote to request leniency for Xie Yao, believing that she was understandable. When the petition bearing more than a dozen signatures was carefully placed in front of Lu Jia by a trusted team member, he was attempting to use the strength of his frail arms to move from the bed to the wheelchair. He had practiced for many days, each time leaving him drenched in sweat, his arms trembling, and countless failures would result in him heavy falling back onto the bed, drawing the nurse's gasps of concern. But he stubbornly refused to accept help, as if he wanted to prove through this nearly self-torturous method that he was not entirely a worthless person. He looked at the petition, the names on it familiar to some extent, yet strange to others. Every name felt like a burning needle, piercing his eyes, stabbing into his heart that was already riddled with 1,000 wounds. Understandable feelings. A piece of true heart. What about his legs? What about his future? What about his dignity as a man? As a warrior? Should it really be destroyed by this true heart? And then there's Jianyu. How dare they even mention Jianyu? Do they not realize that it was he who personally gave up on Jianyu? It was him, acting like a fool, who pushed his true love, the wife who gave everything for him, to a dead end for the sake of such a worthless person. A wave of sickly sweetness surged up his throat, as Lu Ziyan abruptly swung his arm, knocking the petition along with the water cup and medicines off the bedside table and onto the floor. He was like a beast trapped in a cage, letting out desperate and furious roars, his eyes bulging and bloodshot, veins on his forehead bulging, his whole body writhing violently from the extreme emotional turmoil. "Captain, doctor, quickly call a doctor." The ward was suddenly thrown into chaos. Medical staff rushed in, restraining him and injecting a tranquilizer. In the second before consciousness was engulfed in darkness, Lu Zi saw the overcast sky outside the window, and in the reflection of the glass, his own face, twisted and grotesque from anger and despair. On the 5th day of Xie Yao's hunger strike, her body had become extremely weak. I ordered the medical officer to forcibly inject her with a nutrient solution to sustain her life. Why won't you let me die?" She lay on the cold floor of the isolation room, her eyes vacant, mumbling to herself. I stood outside the isolation room, looking at her through the iron bars. "Die." My voice sounded particularly clear and cold in the empty isolation room. "That would be too easy for you, Xie Yao." She jerked her head around, her murky eyes flashing with hatred. "Jianyu, you venomous woman, may you die a terrible death." I paid no mind to her curse and slowly replied, "Don't you want to see Lu Jia? I can give you a chance." Xie Yao's eyes instantly lit up, as if she had grasped the last straw of salvation. But not here, I continued. Tomorrow, the refuge will hold a general assembly to announce the decision regarding your attempted theft. By then, everyone will be present. What do you want to do? Xie Yao watched me warily. I leaned slightly forward, locking eyes with her through the iron bars, the corners of my mouth curling into a cold, icy arc. I want you, in front of everyone, to clearly state whether you stole the medicine for Lu Jie, or for your own hidden motives. What kind of deal have you made privately with those who petitioned for you? Xie Yao's face instantly turned as pale as paper. Her eyes filled with sheer terror. She certainly understood what I meant. Those who helped her spread rumors and signed the petition had more or less received the rations that she had secretly intercepted and that rightfully belonged to Lu Jie. Or little trinkets that she had obtained from who knows where. Once these things come to light. No, you can't. She trembled, her words in disarray. I can. I straightened up, my tone leaving no room for doubt. Either you confess and receive leniency at the General Assembly, or I will permanently exile you now for attempted theft and endangering the safety of the refuge. You choose. Having said that, I no longer looked at the expression of desperate struggle on her face and turned to leave. I knew how she would choose. Between death and total social death, people like her will always choose the latter. After all, as long as she was alive, she might still be fantasizing about the chance to turn her life around. The next day, the largest assembly hall of the shelter was bustling with people. Almost all the members who could break free from their duties had come. People were whispering to each other, discussing fervently. The atmosphere heavy yet tinged with an uncontrollable excitement of watching a spectacle. I stood on the stage, my gaze calmly sweeping over the audience below. Lu Jie was also brought in by the nurse. Sitting in an inconspicuous corner, he kept his head down, enveloped in an air of desolation, not daring to make eye contact with anyone. When the emaciated Xie Yao, supported by 2 team members, was brought on stage, the entire venue fell silent in an instant. Countless gazes, like searchlights, focused on her. I picked up the megaphone, my voice clearly resonating throughout the venue. Regarding the incident of team member Xie Yao's attempted theft of important medical supplies. After investigation, the evidence is conclusive. Now, I will allow the individual to state the course of events and their motive. Everyone's eyes turned towards Xie Yao. She trembled all over, her face pale, her lips quivering. She glanced at Lu Jie in the corner below the stage, then quickly looked away. Finally, as if resigning herself to her fate, she closed her eyes and, with a voice laced with tears and profound humiliation, began to confess in a halting manner. I stole medicine. Not because of Brother Xinyan. It's because I was afraid that he wouldn't get better. And I would have no one to rely on. I also used Brother Xinyan's nutritional products and medicines to secretly exchange for some skincare products and food, and gave them to a few people, to help me speak well of him. With every word she spoke, the uproar from the audience grew louder. Those who had previously signed the petition were now wishing they could bury their heads in the ground, their faces flushed with embarrassment. Meanwhile, in the corner, Lu Xinyan, upon hearing Xie Yao's admission that she stole the medicine for her own sake, even using his life-saving supplies to win people's favor, suddenly lifted his head, staring fixedly at the figure on stage, his eyes nearly bursting with intensity. So, that's how it is. What deep and unwavering love. What selfless devotion. It's all nonsense. From beginning to end, she only thought of herself. She treated him like a long-term meal ticket. After his paralysis, she did not think about how to take care of him, but rather how to exploit his remaining value for her own gain, even going so far as to steal life-saving medicine. A tremendous sense of absurdity and the anger of being deceived engulfed him like a tsunami. He felt a sharp pain in his chest, a metallic sweetness rising in his throat, and darkness swimming before his eyes. On stage, Xie Yao's confession continued, her voice growing softer, filled with despair and shame. Below the stage, Lu Jiyu suddenly bent down and started coughing violently. Bright red blood splattering onto the back of his pale hand. A horrifying sight. "Captain!" the nurse shouted in panic. The venue once again descended into chaos. 3 days after the General Assembly, I stood before the panoramic window of the highest command room in the shelter. Outside the window was an expanse of eternal ice and snow, while inside stood the solemn figures of department heads. The old director solemnly placed the keycard, representing the highest authority, in the palm of my hand. His voice was steady and strong. "Jian Yu, from today on, you are the commander-in-chief of the Hope Shelter. We all believe you can lead everyone to go further." There was no refusal, no modesty. I took the keycard and turned to face the crowd. His gaze swept over familiar and unfamiliar faces, ultimately settling on the figure in the corner who was trying to hide. Lu Jie was being pushed by his former adjutant. Like a shadow faded to gray. My first command. My voice traveled through the loudspeakers, clear and cold, is to revoke all privileges and treatments of the former Captain Lu Jie. Effective immediately. He is to be treated as an ordinary disabled team member and relocated to the collective rehabilitation area. A subtle sound of gasping arose from the crowd. Lu Jie suddenly raised his head, looking at me in disbelief, his lips trembling. The eyes that once brimmed with arrogance now held nothing but humiliation and a hint of desperate pleading. I met his gaze without a trace of hesitation. Second command. Team member Xie Yao. Theft of important supplies. Incitement of public sentiment. Endangering order. Sentenced to permanent exile. Execute immediately. The order was given, with no room for reversal. When Xie Yao was escorted out of the thick doors of the sanctuary, she let out a scream that sounded inhuman. She struggled desperately, turning back to shout, "Brother Jie, save me. I know I was wrong. Jianyu, you won't die well. You will all freeze to death out there." Her curse was instantly swallowed by the howling cold wind. 2 executioners expressionlessly pushed her into the vast snowy expanse, leaving only the bare essentials of 3 days' rations and a poor-quality protective mask. In the extreme cold of -60 degrees, everything would be judged fairly. The gate slowly closed, cutting off her final cries and severing a dirty past. A team member whispered, "Commander, Lu Jie requests to see you for the last time." I looked at the surveillance screen, where a man at the entrance of the communal care area was being stopped by a nurse, shaking his wheelchair wildly and screaming my name like a madman. Not seeing him. 2 words, light as a feather, yet they felt like a final verdict. A year later, under my leadership, the refuge not only strengthened its defenses but also established a trade alliance with 2 other large shelters through diplomatic means. We found new geothermal energy points, expanded the cultivation areas, and even restored a small-scale educational program. Hope shone on this frozen ground for the first time so vividly. On a rare evening with stable energy supply, I went to visit the children at the newly built activity area. They were singing a crisp nursery rhyme under the teacher's guidance. As I turned to leave, I encountered Lu Jie, who was being pushed out by a caretaker for some fresh air. At the corner of the corridor, he was emaciated, his eye sockets sunken, curled up in a tattered wheelchair, covered with a patched blanket. The once handsome face now bore only a sickly pallor and a numb lifelessness. Upon seeing me, a faint glimmer suddenly burst forth in his deathly still eyes. His cracked lips moved, emitting a broken gasp. "Jian Yu." I was wearing a pristine commander's uniform, my stature upright, forming a starkly tragic contrast with his disheveled state. The caregiver looked at me nervously, afraid that I would blame him. I merely cast a faint glance at him, like I was looking at an inconsequential old object, my gaze not lingering for a moment as I walked straight past him. The breeze lifted by the hem of her skirt brushed against his stiff fingers. His outstretched hand remained futilely frozen in midair. Behind him, he could hear a suppressed whimper, much like an old bellows, accompanied by the caregiver's soft reassurances. Another 6 months passed, and I personally led a team that successfully eradicated a gang of raiders who had long been harassing trade routes. returning with a bountiful haul and newfound prestige. Just back in the command room. My trusted aide brought me a report, his tone calm. Commander, the rehabilitation area reports that Lu Xia passed away early this morning. Cause of death was organ failure and complications. I was signing an energy allocation document. The pen didn't even pause for a second. Understood. Handle the affairs according to standard procedures for regular personnel. Yes. The aide turned and left. I signed the last document, put down my pen, and walked to the window. Outside, the ice and snow remained. But the newly built greenhouse dome in the distance reflected a faint light from the sky. And the laughter of children was faintly audible. I raised my hand and gently brushed over the frost flowers crystallized on the window frame. The cold still pierced to the bone. But my heart is no longer frozen. The hatred and grievances of the past, the tangled love and infatuation, have long been crushed and weathered in the torrent of time and the responsibilities I bear, dissipating in the endless winds of this harsh winter. I turn around and walk towards the desk piled high with unfinished paperwork. The road ahead is long. And the ice field is yet to thaw. But my sanctuary and I will keep moving forward. Epilogue. Lu Xia. Lu Xia knew he was nearing his end. The complications of organ failure gnawed at his insides like countless ants. The pain had long since numbed, leaving only a chill that seeped from his marrow, colder than the -60 degrees outside the shelter. The air in the communal therapy area is always filled with a dull smell of disinfectant mixed with aging. He curled up on the stiff hospital bed, listening to the blurry murmurs of the old soldier in the next bed, who had undergone amputation due to frostbite. In his sleep, he often dreams. In my dreams, I always return to that night 3 years ago, when the temperature suddenly dropped to -60 degrees. In the communicator, his voice was distorted by fear and pain. Jian Yu, choose Xie Yi Yao. She can't die. Then, the scene abruptly changed. It was Jian Yu standing on the edge of the icy cliff, looking at him. Her eyes that once sparkled with starlight now filled only with frozen despair. He reached out his hand and harshly pushed her down. No. He always woke up here, drenched in cold sweat, his heart racing as if it were trying to escape the confines of his chest. In the darkness, he gasped for breath, futilely trying to move legs that had long since lost sensation. A great wave of regret washed over him, the feeling of suffocation more unbearable than the pain. How could he give up Jian Yu for a woman like Xie Yao, the one who, when he was still a naive youth, stood by his side, accompanied him during training, joined him on missions, and when he was injured, held back tears with stubbornness in her red eyes, always supporting him despite her worries every time he took a risk. Jian Yu, the one who, when the bitter cold arrived, used her not-so-wide shoulders to support a world for him, risking her lifetime and again to search for supplies, keeping the best for him while secretly gnawing on frozen synthetic rations. Jian Yu, how could he believe that Xie Yao's superficial delicateness and admiration were more precious than Jian Yu's calm and resilient love? Cough, cough. Ha! A sound like a broken bellows emerged from his throat as he struggled to turn his head and look out the window. It was almost dawn. A grayish light trickled through the frosted window, reluctantly spilling in a little. He remembers that before, the windows of his and Jian Yu's home were always polished to a bright shine. Jian Yu said that no matter how cold it is outside, the home should always look bright and warm. Now this recuperation facility is as cold as a coffin. The medicine time. The nurse's voice interrupted his thoughts. Carrying the indifference of routine, the caretaker roughly propped him up, stuffing several pills of different colors into his mouth, then forcing a mouthful of warm water down his throat. The actions were quick, yet completely devoid of warmth. Some of the water choked into his airways, causing him to cough violently, the bitter taste of the pills spreading in his mouth. He had once been the captain of an elite special forces team, a figure whom countless team members looked up to, and the towering husband in Jian Yu's eyes. Now, he was merely a burdensome invalid, someone who required constant assistance for eating, drinking, and all bodily needs. 23. Today, it seems a bit lively outside. He steadied his breath and asked in a hoarse voice. It seemed he could hear the distant cheering. The caretaker replied casually while tidying up. It's the commander who has returned with the team. They've won a great victory, clearing out that band of marauders and bringing back quite a few good things. The commander, Jianyu. His heart felt as if it were being squeezed tightly by an invisible hand. The pain so intense that he could hardly breathe. He had seen her as a commander, standing tall, calm, powerful, and unwavering. Those eyes, which once reflected only his figure, now held the safety and future of the entire shelter. She was no longer that Jianyu who would be delighted by a glance from him and saddened by a harsh word. It was he who had personally strangled that Jianyu. Is she okay? He almost exhausted his last bit of strength, meekly asking this question. The caregiver looked at him strangely, seemingly thinking he had asked a foolish question. The commander is certainly fine. If it weren't for the commander, people like us might have starved or frozen to death long ago. The caregiver finished speaking and turned to take care of other patients. Yes, she is very good. So good. It no longer has anything to do with him. A violent cough struck again, this time carrying a rusty, metallic sweetness. He felt life slipping away quickly from this decaying body. Consciousness began to blur. In a daze, it seemed he once again saw that afternoon from many years ago, on the training ground, when Jianyu had just beaten him half a move. Her eyes bent with laughter, and under the sun, sweat glistened as it slid down her fair neck. She reached out her hand to him, her voice clear. Lu Jia, do you concede? What did he say at that time? It seemed like he let out a hum, turned his head away, but couldn't help the corners of his mouth lifting. How he wished he could hold that hand again, to tell her he was wrong, to tell her he regretted it. But that hand, he could no longer reach it. The cold darkness swept over him like a tide, gently yet cruelly consuming him completely. In the final remnants of consciousness, only one thought remained, like a curse, entwining him until his soul vanished. If only he could start over. However, there is no if. When the first ray of light in the morning completely illuminated the frost flowers on the windowpane, the nurse discovered that the former captain in bed 3 had already breathed his last. He lay with his eyes open, gazing toward the window, and in the hollow depths of his pupils, endless regret and a love that could never be expressed again were frozen. 24. Epilogue. Xie Yao. Xie Yao was jolted awake by the cold. No, more precisely, she was awakened by the intense pain of her body battling against the survival instinct and the extreme chill. Every inch of exposed skin felt as though it were being pierced repeatedly by billions of burning needles. The inside of her mask caked with frost, and each feeble breath tugged painfully at her lungs. The inferior protective suit could not withstand the deadly embrace of -60 degrees. The cold seeped in everywhere, drilling into the bones and freezing her blood. Help me, she tried to shout, but her voice was so weak that she could hardly hear it herself. Before her was an expanse of blinding white, a boundless snowfield with no glimmer of hope in sight. The heavy alloy door of the shelter had completely vanished from view a day ago, utterly severing her only chance of survival. She remembered being pushed out, and Jianyu was standing behind the door, coldly looking at her through the gradually closing gap. That gaze was colder than the icy plains, without a hint of fluctuation, as if looking at a piece of refuse waiting to be dealt with. Jianyu, you bitch, venomous woman, you won't have a good death. She cursed with all her strength, but her teeth trembled wildly, making a clicking sound. Why has it come to this? She just wanted to live a little better. Is that wrong? Lu Jia loved her so much that he would give up his life for her. So what's wrong with using a little of his resources, those medicines, since he wouldn't get better anyway? Using them to maintain her beauty in exchange for a better life. What's wrong with that? It's all Jianyu's fault. If Jianyu had obediently saved Lu Jia in the first place, he wouldn't have been paralyzed. She wouldn't have to serve a cripple, wouldn't have to take the risk of stealing medicine, and wouldn't have ended up like this. Yes, it's all Jianyu's fault. Hatred temporarily made her forget the cold, But reality soon dealt her an even heavier blow. The 3 days' worth of rations consisted of synthetic compressed biscuits as hard as rocks. She shivered as she took one out, wanting to take a bite, but found the biscuit had already frozen to the point of being unbreakable, and her fingers, encased in thick gloves, were so clumsy that, without realizing it, that life-saving biscuit slipped from her grasp and vanished into the bottomless snow pit in an instant. No. She let out a desperate wail, lunging forward to dig futilely, but only unearthing a handful of cold snow. Hunger, like another demon, began to gnaw at her stomach. On the first day, she trudged through the cold and hunger, trying to find a sheltered spot or the rumored other refuge. But as far as the eye can see, it's nothing but snow. The next day, her toes began to lose feeling, followed by her fingers. The mask was broken, and the warm breath immediately froze on her eyelashes and hair, leaving her vision blurred. She fell countless times. Each time getting up became more and more difficult. The hallucinations began to appear. She seemed to see a warm room, saw Lu Jiu gently smiling at her, and saw the team members who adored her. "Brother Jiu, save me. I know I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong," she cried, her tears immediately freezing into icicles that hung from her face. No one responded to her. All that could be heard was the howling wind, as if it were mocking her with the utmost cruelty. 25. On the 3rd day, she could no longer move at all, curled up in a shallow snow pit. The heat from her body was rapidly vanishing. The frostbitten areas began to turn black and rot, exuding an indescribable stench. After the extreme cold passed, a strange burning sensation arose, making her want to tear off all her clothes. She knew that she was close to death. Just as her consciousness was about to fade completely, she heard footsteps. It's not an illusion. It's real. The crunch sound of stepping on the snow. Hope ignited her last ounce of strength in an instant. She strained to lift her head and in her blurry vision, saw several figures dressed in heavy furs and wearing wind goggles. It's other survivors. Is it a rescue team? Help! Help me! She reached out her hand with her last bit of strength. The figures stopped and closed in. Their eyes surveyed her with no compassion, only a coldness, as if assessing the value of an item. One person crouched down, roughly tearing off her tattered mask, gripping her chin to examine her face, then checking her frostbitten and rotting hands and feet before disdainfully letting go. "Damn. Thought I found something usable. The face is all right, but the hands and feet are a mess. Useless. No value," the man said in a rough voice. Another voice echoed, indifferent. "Looks like she's been exiled from some shelter. Forget it. Strip her of these rags and see if there's anything useful. Hurry up. We can't stay in this damned place. Please, don't. I'm begging you. Take me with you." Xiao pleaded in terror, realizing that these people were not saviors at all. No one paid her any attention. Those survivors were actually more brutal than the marauders, being scavengers of the ice plains who specialized in picking up the abandoned supplies of the exiles. Engaging in even more despicable dealings, they violently tore at her already inadequate protective suit, rummaging through every pocket, even yanking off the pair of cheap alloy earrings that had long lost their luster, taking away the last few valuable things she had on her and stripping her of her final shred of modesty. Then, they threw her back into the snow pit, bare and naked, as if discarding a piece of real trash. Ugh, what bad luck! The scavengers cursed, quickly disappearing into the wind and snow with the insignificant loot they had scraped from her. A complete, unadulterated cold enveloped her in an instant. Shame, despair, and fear, all emotions had vanished, leaving only her body instinctively trembling violently. She could feel her life slipping away rapidly, her body temperature dropping sharply, consciousness sinking into an endless darkness, unaware of how long it had been. Just before she completely lost consciousness, she felt something touching her rotting ankle, soft and cold and damp. She strained to open her eyes a crack. She saw several pale, plump, oversized maggots of ice-dwelling creatures emerging from the snow, writhing and crawling up her frozen body, beginning to gnaw at the blackened, decaying flesh. The slight, eerie sound of their gnawing became the last sound she would hear in this world. Her mouth was agape, her eyes wide, with her pupils reflecting the gray, overcast sky and the endless ice and snow. The face that once captivated Lu Jie and made Jian Yu jealous now twisted into a grotesque expression of terror and despair, soon covered by the falling snowflakes, ultimately to be frozen along with this filthy body, becoming an insignificant part of this cruel ice field, nourishing the lowest and most repugnant creatures. 26. In the 12th spring of the extreme cold, the surface temperature finally rose to -45 degrees. The Hope shelter has been expanded threefold, and the new cold-resistant crops cultivated in the dome greenhouse are even able to bear small fruits. The children were reciting poems from the bygone era in the temperature-controlled classroom, while long lines always formed in front of the trading post, waiting to exchange supplies. I stood in front of the holographic map in the command room, listening to various departments report on the progress of spring tilling. My aide, Wei Nanfeng, stood beside me, occasionally providing precise data whenever my gaze swept over a certain point on the map. The permafrost in the northern valley has begun to thaw, and the exploration team suggests that we can try to dig for underground water sources next month. The new thermal insulation material sent by the Trade Alliance has arrived and is prioritized for the newly constructed residential areas. His voice was steady and clear, like a stream after the snow has melted. When the meeting ended, he casually picked up my thermos to fill it with hot water, placing it beside me at just the right warmth for sipping. The Alliance representative joked privately, "Deputy Wei is not just a deputy. He is clearly the commander's personal steward." He heard it but did not argue, merely lowering his head to sort through the documents, the tips of his ears faintly turning red. That evening, I finished work on time, which was quite rare for me. When I returned to my residence, I saw a bouquet of pale blue icefield flowers on the coffee table in the living room. These small flowers only grow in specific rock crevices and require a 3-hour hike to be picked. Wei Nanfeng came out of the kitchen wearing an apron, carrying a stew pot. Today the harvest team got some fresh tundra beast meat, so I tried adding a bit of greenhouse herbs. A warm scent wafted from the pot, and beads of sweat formed on his forehead. The man who once calmly sniped on the battlefield was now ladling soup for me with those steady hands. Suddenly, I recalled many years ago when I had also prepared soup for someone else, only to receive coldness and betrayal in return. "What's wrong?" He set down the ladle and looked at me. I shook my head. Our fingertips inadvertently brushed as I took the bowl. He gently held my hand. His palm bore the thin calluses of years spent wielding a gun. Yet it felt warm like the sunshine in the eternal daylight zone. In the middle of the night, we suddenly received an emergency report. A leak had occurred at Energy Well No. 2. When we arrived at the scene, the burst pipeline was spewing high-temperature steam. I was about to step forward when Wei Nanfeng had already taken the lead, blocking me with his protective shield. "Commander, fall back. Team 3, follow me." He led the charge into the thickening steam. And 3 hours later, the leak was finally brought under control. When he emerged, a large patch of his protective suit's arm had been corroded away, and his skin was covered in burns. As the medic administered treatment, I stood by watching. He looked up and smiled at me. "It's nothing. It doesn't hurt." I suddenly thought of Lu Jie. Back then, he had only a minor injury, yet he wished for everyone in the shelter to know how much he was suffering. And this person before me, when truly injured, instead smiled and said it was nothing. 27. When spring truly arrived, we held a simple ceremony at the newly built observatory. There were no flowers and no wedding gown. I wore my everyday commander's uniform while he donned his faded military uniform. The exchanged rings were crafted from the same piece of meteorite, with our names engraved on the inner band. When he said "I do," cheers from children releasing energy orbs rang from afar. The orbs ascended into the sky like shooting stars, illuminating the snow and ice that had yet to melt. Later, we often stood side by side on the stargazing platform, watching the auroras swirl outside the repairing ozone layer. One night, he suddenly said. Actually, the first time I saw you was at Lu Jian's wedding. I looked at him in surprise. At that time, you were wearing a simple white dress, helping a drunken teammate out of trouble. I thought, this girl has the entire Milky Way in her eyes. He smiled and said, later, when I heard you got married, I applied to transfer to the farthest exploration team. So this love had actually existed for so long. And I only just discovered it now. I rested my head on his shoulder and caught a faint scent of energy crystal powder on him. It turns out there was someone who had silently protected me all these years while I blindly chased after the wrong shadow. Yesterday, while sorting through old belongings, I came across the box of mementos left by Lu Jie when he passed away. Inside, besides the dog tags, there was an unsent letter, the handwriting so shaky it was almost illegible. Jianyu. I regret every day. If only I could start over. I couldn't finish reading it, finding it somewhat ridiculous. Then the letterhead was handed over to the processing center together with the box. As I turned around, I saw Wei Nanfeng standing at the door, holding our just 1-year-old daughter. Our daughter waved her little hands, babbling, and he leaned down to kiss the child's cheek. Then extended his hand to me. Unknowingly, I had long forgotten the past and had embraced my own life. In the 25th year of the extreme cold era, the surface temperature finally stabilized above 0 degrees. The once Hope shelter has evolved into a thriving surface city. Named New Dawn. Under the glass dome, lush parks flourish, children frolic by the fountains, and the melodies of a bygone era resonate in the reconstructed schools. I have stepped down from my position as commander for 3 years now and am currently a distinguished professor at New Dawn University, teaching the history of survival in extreme cold and crisis management. Wei Nanfeng was responsible for designing the city's security system. Unlike me, my daughter perfectly inherited her father's calmness and my stubbornness. This spring is exceptionally warm, and I took the research team to the Northern Valley for an ecological survey. After the glaciers retreated, the exposed rock layers recorded the traces of that harsh era. Professor Jian, there's a discovery over here. The students' exclamations came from the exploration site. I walked over and saw a twisted skeleton revealed beneath the melting ice. The corpse was unusually well preserved. The skeleton curled up in an extremely painful position, completely naked, with distinct gnawing marks on the ends of its limbs. Its hollow eye sockets gazing at the sky as if silently screaming. The students showed signs of distress, and some turned their heads away. I watched quietly, despite the twisted and contorted face of the corpse. I recognized her at a glance. Xiaoyao. More than 20 years of time seemed to be compressed into this moment. I remembered her pitiful appearance back then, remembered her affected demeanor next to Lu Jia, remembered her frantic curses when she was exiled. Now, only this remains. A corpse sealed in ice for 20 years, silently telling the story of her final fate. Should we record it? A student asked me in a soft voice. Yes, record it, I replied, my voice unusually calm. This is also part of history, documenting all those who chose the wrong path in the extreme cold. The exploration team carefully extracted the bones. During the process of moving, a small, rusted metal tag fell from the tightly gripped hand bones of the skeleton. It was an identity tag issued in the early days of the shelter, with the faint inscription of the name Xiaoyao. The student handed the identity tag to me. I took it, the cold metal warming slightly under the spring sunshine. I held the identity tag for a moment and then gently placed it back beside the skeleton. Bury it right here, I said to the students. No need for a headstone. A few students nearby dug a simple grave. As the earth slowly covered the skeleton, I turned to gaze beyond the valley. In the distance, the glass dome of New Qi City sparkled in the sunlight. In the distance, I seemed to see the direction of home. Wei Nanfeng should have finished work by now, helping his daughter with her homework, while the kitchen simmered with my favorite soup. Professor Jian, are you okay? A student asked with concern. I smiled faintly and shook my head. The spring breeze brushed against my hair, carrying the fragrance of grass and earth. At that moment, I suddenly realized that I no longer hated Hatred is like ice and snow, freezing the heart into a wasteland. Love, on the other hand, is a spring breeze that can revive all things. Xie Yao's ending was tragic, but it was the bitter fruit of her own choices. Lu Jie's regret runs deep, but it has already become his solitary prison. As for me, Jian Yu, I have long since stepped out of that icy realm. I reached into my pocket and felt the little stone my daughter secretly slipped into my hand this morning. She said it was a lucky stone found by the riverbank. All right, let's wrap up, I said to the students. Today is my daughter's birthday, and I need to get back to make her a cake. As I turned to leave, the spring sunlight was just right, warmly shining on my back. I left that skeleton, along with all the past grudges and grievances, forever trapped in the melting ice. Ahead lies the land of rebirth, a warm home, and the people who love me and are waiting for my return. This time, I can finally walk towards the future that truly belongs to me, one that blossoms in the warmth of spring, without looking back. End of text.